Morning, everybody, and thanks for joining us again. This is the fourth in a series of free webinars to give you a bit of an outline of the subject of personal resilience. And a number of people have asked us about the links between resilience and stress, and we thought it'd be a good idea to maybe spend a little bit of time talking about stress today and resilience and the sort of vicious or virtuous circle that exists between both of these sorts of ideas. It is interesting how the language of resilience and stress seems to be very sort of linked to engineering, isn't it? And really, there wasn't a set of words to describe this sort of concept much before the 50s, and I think that's sometimes a problem because we sort of think that resilience is an engineering term, but it's not, because it has too much more to do with psychology, and the same with stress. So we're going to get started now, and as it says on screen, please check your speakers. If you can't hear me well enough, please turn them up. There will be a link so you can look at this webinar in your leisure if you're not able to join us now, and there's a chat role below, so if you want to join the live chat, please feel free. You're more than welcome. And if you'd like to send me a video, as you can see, my email address is below, and you can join us on social media, on LinkedIn, Facebook, and all the other www dots that exist out there, because we're joining the new age. And you might also be interested in our new podcast series that has a number of new people. In fact, there's a whole podcast devoted to stress with an American contributor, I should say, called Mary Wingo. She lives in the Chilean Andes, and she has a fantastic lifestyle and specializes in stress, has a lot of books, has a number of resources which are free, which you can have a look at as well. So perhaps have a look on iTunes or any other download and look for Resilience Unraveled as part of our podcast series. We're very proud of it, and we're building up the numbers of podcasts. I think we're up to 10 now, and they will continue to follow. So please feel free to join us. So let's get started today. This is a little bit about the plan, looking at a little bit about us, just to recap some of our key ideas, and then we'll get into the stress thing. There won't be a huge number of surprises today, because actually there's a lot written about stress. Stress is talked about all the time, and part of the problem here is just to be able to throw a bit of light on some of the sort of key areas, really. If you want to deep dive into this area, we produce many more sort of tools and techniques that will help you. But at least it'll give you an overview to get you started. So a little bit about us. We're all about performance. We've got toolkits both online and offline, and we work with organizations and people both as coaches and as trainers to help people build resilience. We have a number of questionnaires that help you monitor and measure your own personal resilience, and we've teamed up with a couple of other types of organisation to produce some very unusual resilience indicators, some which are very psychologically driven, and some which are driven around the idea of people who are very sensitive and whose resilience can be affected by undue amounts of stress or insufficient amounts of resilience. So how you create a culture that stimulates people who are highly sensitive against those who are less sensitive can be useful in the workplace. So let's get on with it, shall we? So resilience, as we have said in many of the podcasts, is about these four things, these sort of four processes. The ability to bounce back, obviously, but that's not good if you can't perform in the moment. And interesting that are the words in our own resilience definition. Being able to deal with pressure and stress in the moment as it's going on. Because you have to be able to perform at all stages. You have to also recognize your triggers, so you need appropriate levels of self-awareness to help you build that, and you have to build the capacity. You have to fund your own personal resilience to be able to deal with pressure and bounce back. And that would make sense. If you think about it like a bank account, you have to invest in order to be able to draw out at the moment it's required. And we all know that better resilience means a better life, basically. And there's a ton of physiological and nutritional evidence that backs up the case for resilience, and in terms of psychological performance as well. The case for it is one. The issue now is how do we develop it, and how do we give people that need better resilience the tools to make that work. And resilience can be different for younger people, for example, who are confused about their careers and where they're going, and some of the sort of challenges of late teenage years in terms of dealing with university, or dealing with money problems, or dealing with, I expected to have a career now, but here I am still living with parents. And in the 50s and 60s, parents who worked all their lives and expected to be retired without children, and there the children are, and then they're still not retired. So, we have to be careful at all stages of our life, not just in the sort of prime years, that we have enough resilience to fund the sort of life and lifestyle that we want to have. And that's what personal resilience is all about. And we use our own toolkit here to build on our potential, use the RUBS toolkit as a sort of lens against how we view the world to be able to build our own resilience. And resilience and confidence and competence all come together in a beautiful sort of mix of potential to give us the life we really want to lead. I mean, certainly in my world, I believe that there's probably only one life, so we may as well live our own and get on with it, really. So let's talk about stress. And stress is interesting because, in a sense, this is the vicious and virtuous circle of stress. Because stress really is a term which is used as an umbrella term. It's used as an adjective, a noun, an adverb. Things are stressful, they stress me out, I feel stressed, you feel stressed, you're making me stressed. You hear the word bandied about in all directions. But really, when we think about the human condition of stress, stress is a function of adrenaline. And adrenaline is a hormone which is incredibly useful for us because adrenaline funds the sort of brain activity to stimulate our bodies to have enough energy to do what we need to do. And effectively, adrenaline works by being produced and then being used up. So that's quite straightforward. And of course, in a sort of an ancient way, we had enough adrenaline to be able to run away, to fight, and do all the things that we needed to do. But now we're funding adrenaline, which isn't used up enough. And so what tends to happen, therefore, is the brain can sense the fact there's not enough adrenaline being used up, and contrarily produces more. Now, the problem with that adrenaline production is if it's still not used up, the body then starts to stimulate the next hormone called cortisol. And cortisol is a steroid hormone. And actually, one of the problems with the sort of negative associations we have with stress are exactly the same as the negative associations we have with cortisol. Cortisol, in fact, is known as the stress hormone. And really, when we're thinking about stress, we're thinking about our relationship with cortisol and this hormone, because it's a problem for us. Because it's quite straightforward to fund adrenaline and then burn it away. Energy is sort of exercise, the simplest way with that. But cortisol takes slightly longer to get going, but when it gets going, boy, it gets going, and it's harder to get rid of as well. Simple leaping about the place or going for a short walk won't sort out cortisol. So it's a bit like it seeps away more slowly than adrenaline does. So what we're trying to do with stress is to make sure that we have enough, because enough is good for us. It gives us all the resources we need in our bodies and our minds to be able to be the people we want to be. And too much can trigger off cortisol, and that's a problem. And of course, if we're inadvertently stimulating cortisol through lifestyle, through some of the dietary choices we make every single day, that can be a problem for us as well. It would be a shame to be stimulating cortisol by mistake, wouldn't it? He said, just about to have some coffee. You take my point. So let's just move on to the next slide. Stress in the workplace is quite interesting, because the way we think about stress there is we constantly need adrenaline to fund the amount of work we have to do. And the problem with work is it can overwhelm us. And when work overwhelms us, what means we have too much work, over too long a time period, or over too short a time period if we have a deadline involved, and we have insufficient amounts of control over it. So for the moment, let's say I was doing a large project and I had a deadline. If it was a huge project, and even though I had a lot of control of it, I would have too much adrenaline in my system. I might get the cortisol running, and what that effectively would do is it would generate my stress responses, and that would be a problem for me. And you can see that actually, if I have enough work, but over a short time period, and I've got plenty of control over it, I can sort of manage that stress implication. But the problem here is these things going out of control. And another thing, of course, is putting myself under pressure. And the pressure is nearly always generated internally, because we decide to talk about things in a way which are making too important. So we've got something to do on Monday, it becomes the most important thing we have to do that day. And actually, the threat of a massive upside and the risk of a potentially large downside creates the pressure for us. So if we put ourselves into a situation where we might have a feeling that we'll be shamed or embarrassed by getting something wrong, will create pressure for us. And stress, using these sorts of four things in the workplace, particularly create lots of negative things. And many of us know about these negative things. We know that cortisol and stress create problems with memory, working memory, our ability to process information in the moment. And if we don't have enough prefrontal cortex activity, it's actually quite hard to control our emotions. It actually is quite hard to control the amount of multitasking we're able to do. I mean, there's a sort of joke that women can multitask and men can't, but actually neither gender can multitask very well at all anyway. It can create all sorts of health problems, stress, in terms of the human biome. It can knock out some of the sort of healthy bugs, because actually the cortisol, the steroid effect of the cortisol affects our bodies. It affects our ability to process fats effectively, and so we can find ourselves putting on weight. And that, of course, can actually make us feel worse, make us feel more sluggish, and therefore we need more adrenaline and cortisol to get us going. And all of those things can have a negative effect. And generally, stress just makes you feel terrible, because of the effects of the cortisol running through your system every single day. So self-awareness is important here. We talk about this in resilience. We talk about this idea that you have to know your feelings, emotions, spoken words, your inner voice, what you're telling yourself. In fact, one of the things in stress is to recognize you're stressed, is to recognize what you're saying to yourself, is to recognize when sometimes you're thinking about, well, this happened to me before, when it happened to me before, oh my goodness, it's going to happen to me again. And we have this thing called memory bias when we're stressed and we have too little prefrontal cortex activity. What happens is we remember our memories incorrectly, and we can remember our memories too critically and seem a little bit out of control, and that's a problem. The second thing is, of course, listen to your inner voice allows you to catch yourself being in your head too much. And if you're in your head too much, you're not in the outside world. In fact, you're probably doing too little and obsessing too much, and of course that funds the need for more energy, which means more. You can see the vicious circle, can't you? You can actually see this working. And in fact, we can use our bodies to help us get a grip of stress, because all of these things which allow us to recognize that stress is running are things that allow us to do something around it. So we have this self-awareness in order to take action. So that's all about making choices about these things. It's about making choices about our body. And I often think that a lot of people focus on stress reduction by focusing on some of the deep psychological sort of solutions, mindfulness and all that sort of stuff. But actually, I've talked to quite a lot of nutritionists, and interesting, I have some back problems at the moment, which make me feel stressed, oddly enough. And they all unsurprisingly say that the key thing to turn to is your body, is to look at whether your body is in sync. So going to an osteopath or a chiropractor or a physio can be really useful, because actually the stress lives in your body. So for example, a back can lock up because of stress, because of the way the steroid and the cortisol works. And actually going and freeing your back, freeing your body, having a good massage, for example, is actually, even if it's just a, sort of one at the spa, can actually help you feel great. I mean, you're lying down for a start. You're probably having a good old gossip, or not allowed to gossip, in my case. And that physical lying down and having your body worked on is a great way of getting stress pumped through the system. Your body can process the physical manifestations of the stress, of the cortisol overload in your muscles, and that's a great thing to be doing. And the second thing, of course, is to eat a better diet. I know it sounds quite peculiar, but the fastest way of getting rid of cortisol is not to add more to it. So getting rid of sugars, getting rid of caffeine in your diet in the short term can be very useful. And even if you're just getting rid of too much coffee and reducing it, I mean, I'm a bit of a coffeeholic, and my Starbucks card gets a battering on a regular basis. And, just sort of standing back and having a different sort of coffee, or drinking green tea, which is often the thing I do when I'm pretty stressed, because green tea's got enough caffeine in it, but the body processes it differently from coffee. It's not about having living a life of misery and self-deprivation. It's about making sure that when the cortisol is running, we're not funding it inadvertently through the sort of dietary choices that we're making. Again, pretty obvious, but when you're in the moment and your prefrontal cortex is starved because there's too much stress running around, we forget the simple things, and the simple things make the difference. And what we're doing here in terms of self-management is to also remember to keep building on self-awareness, because the ability to turn the vicious cycle into the virtuous cycle comes from being aware of where we are in the cycle. So firstly, get a grip of your body, and then get a grip of your thoughts, and that will help you get some sort of feeling over your emotion. And the emotion that tends to run when stress is in play is anxiety. And anxiety is fear of the unknown. We're going to spend more time in other podcasts and other webinars talking about anxiety, because we have a particular guest who's got some real expertise in this area. But anxiety is the modern killer, and it is funded by stress, and stress is funded by anxiety. And it's really important that we get these things in play, because obviously they affect our resilience, but also the toolkits for resilience help with anxiety and stress as well. So there's a beautiful virtuous circle that goes on when you start to look at these sorts of areas. So it's taking action, as we talked about, a little bit of dietary and massage and such like, but breathing is important, making sure there is enough oxygen in our system, and that sounds so obvious, and people go, oh, here we go, we're doing breathing again. But really, people don't use the diaphragmatic breathing, which is recommended by people in this area. I just watch people on courses so many times just breathing the wrong way around, sucking the chest in, lifting the shoulders up, pulling your tummy in as you try and breathe in, and underfunding the amount of oxygen that's in the body. And it's such a simple thing to fix. And it also helps with sleep, because the more sleep you have, the more stress you're likely to be able to counter, because your brain has enough time to re-energize. And of course, the problem with sleep and stress is the more stressed you are, the more sleep the problem you get with sleep. Now, the better the breathing is, the more likely you are to be able to go to sleep in the first place. If you wake up in the middle of the night, write down what's on your head, not on an iPad or anything like that, because blue light's a killer for sleep continuation. Have a piece of paper by the bed, go for a walk, come back to bed, get into bed, go back to sleep. We do often lie there tossing and turning, saying, I was awake all night, I watched the clock. I say that on a regular basis, and my wife tells me I was asleep all night, and usually snoring. But somehow we lose perspective of time during the night. People are very fond of mindfulness, but mindfulness is really about being in the moment without any sort of judgment. And we can do that during our waking days using breathing. So why not do that? And some people recommend just going to have a nap for 20 minutes a day. And that's great if you can, but it's better not to. It's better to really make sure that you don't nap during the day and then find yourself not sleeping at night, because then you've got a vicious circle going on. We want that virtuous circle. Instead of napping, go for a walk, go outside, wander around go literally, if you're at work, get up, go downstairs, and go outside and do what you need to do. Dodge the smokers, obviously, because that's not great. You don't have to sit on an ivory tower going on. Sometimes just walking backwards and forwards, moving your muscles is the key that you need to do. If your boss says you're too busy to go to, if you're too busy to for your workload to take a 20-minute break, and tell them that that's better than being off work for 3 months with stress. Another key thing is to laugh, to have some fun, and have people around you who are not toxic. There's no doubt that in the world there's some really toxic people. God, they drive you nuts. And I think as time rolls on and you get a bit older, and not that I'm saying I'm Methuselah here, but you do realise that people who are irritating just need to be out of your life. And I think when we're younger, we're frightened or sort of more conscious of needing to please people. As you get a bit older and a bit more irascible, you can sort of say, do you know what? I don't need these people in my life. Let's move on. And why don't you? And that can happen at work. But obviously what we need to be doing through these things is building our awareness, constantly building our awareness to understand what's going on. A couple of little tools to finish off with, sort of practical things you can have a go at. A lot of people know the urgent and important time matrix, and this is a sort of focus matrix. In fact, you can create any sort of matrix by having 2 axes and figuring out what's going on here. But where your focus is in your life is the key. Where you're getting high effort and high payoff is where things are meant to be. It's the no-brainer. Okay, isn't it? Because actually that's the place you want to be. That's your sweet spot, where you're doing stuff that's got really high payoff and you're really, really, really getting tons of reward. Well, why wouldn't you be doing more of that? And part of the problem here is we're doing things which we don't really thoroughly enjoy doing. We spend a lot of our times at work. So why don't we work in places where we want to be? But I can't do this, and I can't work that because of this, because of that. They're all just the choices we're making. And remember, one of the key things in stress management is to be focused on the things that actually you have control at and you're going to be doing for a lot of the time. So figure that out. Now, you may have to do stuff you might not like, but in the short term, but if it's adding to where you want to go in the longer term, then that's okay anyway. And you can still get high reward coming back from stuff that's tough to do with a high payoff. I'm working on a project at the moment that's it's possibly the hardest thing I've done for a while. But, really, I think it'll be rewarding when it's finished. Let's just say that. But at the moment, it's just in the process of grind. But, when the payoff arrives, it'll be better. And sometimes, doing things where the payoff is slightly put off, it's not always immediate, is an important thing. I mean, we talk about deferred gratification with kids, but we're the same as adults. It's the sort of, do the saving and then spend it rather than get the credit card, have it, and then spend, forever paying it off. It is quite an interesting way of just, rescheduling what we're doing to say, I'm going to put some work in now and I will expect the payoff to come at a different point rather than expecting payoff all the time. It is important as human beings to have a period of boredom and, slight sort of downturns, because it helps you appreciate the upturns a bit. I remember an old boss of mine saying, you only appreciate the high points in life if you've had lower points. And the lower points you've had, the higher points you will really get. And it's interesting because that's a point in resilience as well, that we want to have things which go wrong, which we can control and turn around and bounce back from. Because the more resilience we have, the more we're able to weather the storm, to quote a colleague of mine, and the more we're able to build our resilience. And therefore, the more we're able to fund the energy we need to spot the triggers the next time it comes. And lots of people know this idea, but this idea of strategically listing everything that you're doing at the moment, and then putting each of those different tasks, all the things that are worrying you perhaps, into one of these circles, either the circle of control, which is the place where you get on and do stuff, because you can control what you're doing, the circle of influence, where somebody else is going to do it, but you have some influence, and the circle of concern, which is stuff where you've got no impact. You can't do anything about it, you can't influence it, but it's just worrying you. And these are the things you need to do less of. But when people say just don't worry, that's fatuous, isn't it? Because you can't not do something. You have to replace it with something else. And in work terms, I often spend a lot of time with people on the outside circle, mithering on about this, that and the other, that they can't do anything about, but actually not doing the stuff in the middle and telling me how stressed they are because they don't have enough time. So if they replace some of the outside circle with some of the inner circle, perhaps that would solve itself. But we said that statement of the blindingly obvious is only blindingly obvious when you have the prefrontal cortex working properly. And that's not working properly. It's not funded well enough when cortisol is running and that steroid is depleting your body and depleting the amount of oxygen in your system. So it is a vicious cycle if you don't use it. Getting in control of stuff, pulling stuff into the middle, and actually just doing things is really important. I'm experimenting with a new little time management technique I heard from Dan Pink recently, who's a really interesting thinker I really admire. And he said he came with something called the 2-minute rule, which is that you look on your list and if there's something you just do then 2 minutes, just do it. And I've been having a go at that recently. I mean, I know it makes you a bit tactical, but it gets you going. And actually, as soon as you start going and doing something and knocking it off, actually it's quite interesting how you feel as if you're in the circle of control. So the simplest solutions can help sometimes. So have a go at that. Those of you who know us know we have some free resources on our website. Claire and I have written this book together, and we also have a second ebook coming out. We also run training courses, and we run a vast range of things and tools and activities. Please check out the podcasts. There'll be more webinars coming soon, and podcasts as well, and enjoy the free resources. And if we can help you in any way, in a more focused way, please do not hesitate to get in touch. And those of you who've been joining in on the chat roll today, I hope you've been able to get some answers. Any communication you'd like to send to me, qed.com, Russell at qedod.com. And if you want to look at our general resources, as you see, qedod.com/resilience-use. We'll look forward to being in touch with you.